Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about why I decided that I will be going for a Hierophant Wander and not for an Elementalist. Now, all the buffs so far for this skill have been indirect, but now we have new patch notes. If you haven't seen this yet, this is on the bottom of the patch notes. There's obviously updates here. And we can see here that Kinetic Blast of Clustering, which was already one of the strongest endgame skills, has been buffed, and not just a little bit. It got buffed from 15 to 17%. Now, if you've never played Kinetic Blast of Clustering, what that number refers to is the added physical damage equal to a percentage of your maximum mana. So for example, if we say that before this patch in endgame, you're going to have around about 7,000 mana, you would get a whopping 1,050 flat physical damage. And that's physical, which is very important for stuff like Headhunter later on, or Grace of the Goddess, stuff like that. But now that 7,000 would actually be 0.17%, which is quite a bit more. In fact, it comes out to around about 16% more damage early and then 13% more damage in late game. And while that might not seem like much for a skill that was already considered by a lot of people and was already very viable, this is a big deal, especially because Kinetic Blast of Clustering's biggest downside is kind of the early to mid game where it is lacking some damage. The clear is absolutely fantastic and ridiculous, but you still have to kill pesky rares. You can't always rely on having a wall, although maybe we can this patch. You need to have that damage. And we then use Fork and returning projectiles. And the way this will look like, I'll just give you a quickie rundown here, is these projectiles will fork from the target, so you have left, right, but there's also going to be a 75% chance for one that directly goes through the middle. And that's important for a few reasons. The way you do this is you have to add an additional projectile to your fork with split shot and additional projectile. So that is a lot of traveling from over there, but it is definitely worth it. You can later get it with Impossible Escape, theoretically, which is going to be a lot more expensive, obviously. But how that will look like is you have that projectile in the middle, and you're targeting the enemy. So you are hitting first up the tornado, which will then make these explosions around it. In endgame, these are going to be 6. They're going to be completely random though, so it depends on how many overlaps you get there. Usually it's 1 to 2. In general, just pointing it out, when it comes to the skill, there's some wild speculation on how many projectiles you get. In general, you should always poison test, although there's some new considerations this patch with one of the Runegrafts, which we're going to talk about. So basically, you hit here, and then the projectile will also connect though, because it goes straight out. So then you have a 75% chance that this projectile will also deal damage, and if it collides, it will also collide with the enemy. So that is another sort of projectiles. And then the forks that don't hit will come back as well. But there is a new consideration here, because these projectiles that usually don't hit and only hit whenever they come back now have the Wall of Force. And the Wall of Force is, you've already seen this in the trailers, it is basically a wall that you can plop down, and it provides something to collide with for projectiles. It only holds for a certain amount of time, but in general, this will be interesting in the mix, but it's a complete question mark right now. It might be broken, it might be utterly useless, we'll see. But best case scenario, you put that wall behind the enemy right here, and now all those projectiles that usually fork out and go into nowhere land, they're just kind of there for clear and for returning proj to hit maybe once or twice again on the boss, will now collide with the wall here, which will then make explosions around those as well, left and right. And with enough AoE, especially from Hierophant, with the 100% AoE from the Ascendancy, you can get some pretty crazy overlaps. One interesting thing, if you've never taken the fork nodes, there is a bottom node here that says increased projectile fork angle and one for reduced projectile fork angle. You take both if you want it to stay the same, but usually I take the increased fork angle. So what happens is the projectile will actually fork out a little bit more, right? Kind of like this, so you get better clear. However, next patch with all these changes, maybe you actually want it to be a little bit more clumped together like this, so that with the Wall of Force you have better overlaps in the middle. We'll have to see. But okay, with all those technicalities out of the way, 16% more damage early, 13% more damage late game. One of the biggest problems with this game that in endgame didn't really matter, but definitely mattered in mid game, is that after the first 3 Ascendancies, it's just, there's nothing really to take. So you can take the Totem Ascendancy, and don't get me wrong, Totems are really good in mid game to carry your single target damage in a sense, but in late game, they're absolute dog shit and don't do anything. And guess what we now have? We have extra ascendancies in Bloodlines. There's a few interesting ones, but the one I have my eyes on right now is the Hunt Leader, which spawns tigers. 5 tigers that you can spawn, and they all give you passive increased critical strike chance and increased attack and cast speed, and they trigger whenever you crit. So even unless they have a crazy internal cooldown, we don't really know. If it's the same as wolves, it's 0.5 seconds, so they will always be up. And from the Q&A, we know that this is a total of 125% crit, 125% increased crit chance, and a total of 35% increased attack and cast speed. If you saw my last video, I speculated it would be like 120 and it would have been like okay. But yeah, they just gave us a generically good alternative here. So this is quote unquote free because you couldn't really take anything as your last ascendancy. Pretty big for this build as well. And it's on a boss that is really easy. Feral is a complete pushover. You just need to get the beast. They start dropping, or they start appearing at level 80. Then we have the recently buffed Grace of the Goddess, which got buffed from 10 to 30 to 10 to 50 Fizz as extra lightning, cold, and fire for a total of round about, I don't know, 150% Fizz extra. You can also go over, obviously. It has okay Fizz, but like I said, all our Fizz will come from the weapon. It's a pretty big deal. We still get the spell damage. And there's another thing here where this used to be super rare, but it is now not the rarest drop from Maven anymore. It got swapped with Progenesis, so it is now a more common drop. Still gonna be expensive as hell because you need to divine it to a decent value. The ranges are crazy, and it's Wander League, so go figure. Sacred Wisps are a little bit weird because the way they work is they don't collide with your Tornado all that well. So I don't even know if I want to run that support, but I still think with the +1, it's most likely worth it. Now, Grace of the Goddess got a pretty neutral nerf buff situation here. The Prophecy wand that it comes on got a little bit less crit and a little bit more attack speed. In general, it is a 5% damage nerf unless you can still reach the crit cap. It is still pretty high opportunity cost, although we do get some of the crit back, but the 1.4 to 1.5 attack speed means it's also going to feel a little bit better. Another pretty exciting change was the Runegraft of Refraction, and this one is very specific, and I couldn't really get an answer on how this works yet, but we'll probably see whenever somebody tests this in standard. The way it works is you fire at most 1 projectile, and skills do chain +1 times and projectiles fork. So that is ridiculously strong. If you don't know, Runegrafts replace one of your masteries. So it's like an item. For example, I don't know, I take a mastery right here and I convert it into a different effect. And we don't know exactly how this works because Kinetic Blast of Clustering does technically only fire 1 projectile, right? It does only fire 1 projectile. The rest of the added projectiles are all just extra explosions. So does that mean that it sets the explosions also to 1 because it is considered a modifier to number of additional projectiles? Everybody has their conspiracy theories about this. It's kind of like 50-50 if it works or not. But if it works, that is ridiculous because now we can remove Awakened Fork and get 20% more damage for a better support. And if it works, there might also be some weird Hydrosphere Tornado shenanigans. Don't get me wrong, these have a cooldown of how often they can get hit. So it's not going to be just like, I don't know, Overlap City, but especially Burst. If you're just going through packs like this tap, that will be a big deal. And if they can fork and then chain in between each other, pretty crazy. Then we also have Power Siphon of the Archmage. If you don't know this skill, that's the transfigured version of Power Siphon, and it has lower attack damage, lower damage effectiveness, 150% base, just like the normal one. It doesn't have the power charge stuff, but it does have 27% of maximum mana as extra lightning damage. So no fizz scaling, but a lot higher lightning damage. So if we, for example, say like before, we have 7,000 mana times 0.27, you're getting almost 2,000 flat lightning damage. And like I said, getting flat damage at the start is quite valuable. The reason I bring this up is because it gives us first Calling Strike, and this 4-link totem setup can be very valuable when you're going through maps for the first time. In fact, I've played this build like a build specialized with just the skill, and it went through butter. So that is one of the things that I might fall back on in case Kinetic Blast of Clustering, like everything here goes wrong and Kinetic Blast of Clustering still doesn't feel good until later investment points. I will just go full ham on this skill instead. But if anything, it's going to be a really good tool to get some extra single target damage. The only consideration here is, will it screw up our Wall of Force? So this Power Siphon of Archmage Ballista could technically technically break some of the wall of force, and if you have 3 totems down, that might be a pretty big deal. So maybe we'll have to work around that, or like place the ballistas correctly. I don't know how it's gonna look like. I'm working with the same thing that you guys have right now. And yeah, reduced fork angle, we'll have to see. We're probably gonna sub out returning projectiles for single target, because otherwise you get too many hits on the wall of force and you don't want to do that. Another thing that might be interesting is a possible guardian start. This one I'm not 100% sure. The shrine buffs are now 20-second duration from the Harmony of Purpose. As you guys know, Unwavering Crusade gives you a level 27 Wrath, 27 Anger. So technically, if we don't want to respec until like level 80 into hero, it is a lot of gold to respec, but maybe it's more efficient. I'm probably just going to lean on the safer route. But yeah, Unwavering Crusade is pretty ridiculous, and the early shrines are good. Do note, though, that the nodes on the tree do not work with it anymore, so maybe it's actually an overall nerf. We'll have to see. I'll think about it. Either way, though, I'm pretty stoked, and I will be working on the POB. I will probably be doing another run. I've already done one, so I'll talk about that more once my full guide is out, probably in around about 24 hours from whenever you're watching this. Do note, though, that while I've played this build 2 times in endgame, I haven't really explored the early game of this build, so I'll have to do that, and it's going to be not a unrisky sort of thing. But on Hierophant, you are extremely safe in terms of, yeah, archetypes that you can play, stuff you can reroll into. There's a lot of different wand setups, so I don't think you're ever gonna have a bad time. But with that being said, we're gonna see what I can figure out until tomorrow. Really happy about this. I was just waiting for a sign. I was waiting for some gem info, but this one made it pretty easy for me. And yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.